Hello. It's been a really interesting day so far. We have talked about management in sort of both the large concept and the small. And today we will focus on a specific part, the accelerated assimilation and the onboarding experience. So let me start by sharing an experience. So I'm sitting in a small room, and across the table sits a colleague of mine and a friend. And my hands are sweaty, and I'm sort of have this lump in my belly. This is one of the worst days of my entire career. We have just decided that this did not work out, and it would be best if my friend worked someplace else. After all was said and done, I gave myself some time to reflect on how this came to happen. At the time, the biggest feeling I had was this sense of failure. I had failed to bring in this talent into the company. And I decided I need to do something about this, and I need help. I personally, and we as an organization at Meltwater, had worked a lot with the onboarding experience over this last year. And the goal today is to share some tools with you to maybe make your onboarding even better. And with me on this journey, I have...
Me. My name is Rona, and like Krista already said, I work as a team coach for one of our development teams at Meltwater. So at Meltwater, we help our customers to gain insights about what's going on outside of their company. Or in my words, we gather a huge amount of media, we apply some data science on it, and then we present the best stuff to our customers. And if you want to know more about Meltwater and the awesome stuff that we do, come talk to us or any other of our 30 colleagues that are here with us today. Now, back to our talk. So Ulla, could you describe a little more what you think went wrong during the onboarding situation that you just shared with us?
Absolutely. My friend, let's call him Thomas for the sake of it, he couldn't quite gel with the team and had a hard time figuring out how to contribute to the team's work. Sometimes it felt like they didn't even speak the same language. When the team did something, Thomas did something else. And I could sort of see the frustration that came with this inability to contribute, and also the helplessness that accompanied this frustration. Sometimes it felt like Thomas couldn't join in on the team culture and couldn't make his impact on the team. So that's what I think.
Okay, so just to summarize, Thomas couldn't contribute and couldn't produce value because the culture transfer to him failed in a way. You could say that he was never assimilated. And so our talk here today is called accelerated assimilation. But what do we actually mean by assimilation? Well, when a new person enters a team, they don't immediately share the same culture. And by culture, we mean the shared values, the shared understandings and assumptions, and even the goals that guide the everyday life of this group. And so there will be a phase where the newcomer tries to acquire the existing culture of the team or the company. And this is because it's very important to us as humans to understand the behavior of a group before we act out. And understand the opinions and the standards of this group and know that we can act accordingly. And this is because commonly during this phase, it is extremely important to us to gain social acceptance. And it's a phase that we believe cannot be bypassed and is what we refer to as assimilation. So, even though assimilation can and probably will happen naturally at some point, you can speed up the process a lot by design, and so hence acceleration. So we will show you here today a few tools that we have been using in order to speed up the process of assimilation and more quicker get our new person productive. And the different roles that you may have in your company may play different parts during this process. And so Ulla will now start by sharing the different roles that we had and the parts that they played during the onboarding experience that he previously described.
Yes, and to describe the role, I will use a tool called personas, and which is sort of archetypical for the different roles we have. So the first persona is the new talent, or Harold the Hire, as we call him. We typically hire people with a few years' worth of experience, so Harold is confident in his abilities, but he also knows that there's a lot more to learn out there. Some other key attributes we typically look for is the ability to sort of self-manage and also the ability to develop and improve yourself. So Harold is strong in those areas too. Then for every new employee that joins, we assign a buddy. So we have Bob the buddy. Bob typically has the same role as Harold and has been with the company for some time. Bob mainly helps Harold with all the practical stuff, at setting up accounts and getting the knowledge needed to perform the job. And for Bob, it's really important that joining in on the team culture as well. Can you please continue, sort of tell me how we assign the buddy?
Tell you what?
Can you tell me how we assign the buddy in this process?
We assign the buddy in this process. It's typically a person that has the same role as Harold the Hire.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, I mean, we also have sort of my role, or the persona we call the Martha the, technology. Martha the manager, and Martha have done this sort of recruiting of Harold and have been driving that part of the process. Martha also is responsible for the long-term development of Harold as well as his performance. And Martha typically manages several employees, so she delegates a lot of the work even though she is ultimately responsible. And for Martha, it's also important that Harold not only become part of the team, but also part of the company as a whole. And then, since most of us work in small teams of up to 8 people, or these 2 pizza teams that we heard earlier today, the team also sort of have a role to play in the onboarding, even if they're not a persona per se. The team mainly helps Harold with the knowledge transfer to get him up to the speed in his role. So now we have heard sort of Harold and Bob and Martha that were present during the experiences I described. Now Rona will arm them with some new tools.
Yes, and the 4 tools that we will arm our personas with are the initiation ritual, the onboarding backlog, the purpose workshop, and the buddy 2.0. Let's get started with the first one. So initiation rituals are a very common occurrence, right? They have been used as long as humans have existed and are seen in all kinds of situations where a person makes a transition of some kind or joins any kind of group or team. Traditionally, these were rites of passages, where, for instance, a person would go from being a child to being an adult. And so the rite of passage would result in the acceptance of the youngster by other adults. But in more modern society, you can still find initiation rituals in all kinds of settings, of course, also outside of the business world. And to highlight more what I'm talking about, I want to give you one example, which I find being a very striking one. It is gang initiation. And it typically involves, harming an enemy to the gang, or blood in, as it's also called, where you show to your gang that you have the same values and that you were committed to their cause. Receiving beating from your gang is another typical example in this setting. So these examples are essentially ones that aren't very pleasant ones, right? It might even strike me as slightly odd for us to bring it up here at a leadership conference. Before I make my point, I just want to make clear that, of course, we support neither, beating up others or taking the beating. Anyways, back to my point and what happens during these initiations. They are there by design, they mark the entrance of a new member to a group. And these two particular examples are very effective ones, because they very quickly lead to team conformity and social acceptance. Sorry, one second. Right, so psychologically speaking, these initiation rituals have a very strong effect on both the new team member and the original team members. It's even proven by research that groups that have very strong initiation rituals have a greater group identity and a stronger sense of belonging to the team. So since the beginning of mankind, it has been important for us to adapt to tribes and societies' rules and standards. That's been crucial for survival. And so hence, we've been reinforced for a very long time to adapt to the groups that we join. So I mentioned earlier that initiation rituals, or strong initiation rituals, they result in team conformity and social acceptance. And these are essentially needed in order to create trust in a team. And trust, of course, is needed before you can start challenging your group's ideas and before you can get your own ideas heard, which is really the state that you want to get to. But moving away from, taking the beating from your team, the process of initiation ritual should obviously be a pleasant one, and preferably something that represents the culture in your company well. Something maybe that you wouldn't likely be doing in any other context. It might be play paintball or have a board game night. Anything where you naturally interact with each other, and where hair the higher can be exposed to the culture and see how they interact with each other, what the vibe is. And most importantly, something where hair can become part of the group. So Ulla, do you have an example of an initiation ritual that you have experienced?
Absolutely. This is not a blood-in experience, but maybe a little bit more corporate-friendly one. So I'm standing with this gravel road in front of me, and around me are some of my new colleagues, most of whom I met for the very first time this day. In my hand, I have this old boot, and the goal for me is to throw that as far down the road as possible. But of course, there's a twist. I have to throw it in between my legs and over my back. Suffice it to say, this is not a skill most of us had a chance to practice much before this occasion. So I go for it, and I throw the boot. I'm a little bit disoriented from the throw, and I sort of try to locate the boot, but I can't see it. And then I hear my colleagues start to laugh. I've thrown the boot backwards. And I feel that this is a precarious moment. I can either sort of be humiliated by my apparent lack of boot-throwing skills, or I can sort of join in on the laughter. I choose the latter, and we had a shared experience. This is something that every new employee takes part in during our boot camp, as we, of course, call them. So, what was the sort of acceleration point here? By designing initiation ritual, you can help shift Harold's focus from fitting in to contributing to the team. So let's move on to the next tool and the onboarding backlog.
Yes. Some time ago, I built a shoe rack. I actually, from start to finish, built a shoe rack. You can see awesome design here in this drawing. And I'm saying this proudly because this is quite atypical for me. A typical thing would be to have lots of ideas, to start realizing some of them, and to finish only very few of them. And I have quite a few examples of this type of behavior floating around in my apartment. So it's usually in the subject of building or rebuilding furniture or solving some kind of annoyance around the house. But this shoe rack was a solution to one such annoyance, like a constant shoe chaos in the hallway. So this project could have been one of those that I started on and then abandoned along the way, where I had found a piece of driftwood in nature and fantasized about some cool lamp I wanted to build. And I never actually feeling committed to doing that. And so the difference was that already a month before I had the idea of building this, I was already signed up for a woodworking class. And having done that, it only felt natural for me to go out and buy hundreds of euros worth of wood. And so once I was head down in the project and I realized the actual proportions of it, I didn't feel I could abandon it. I was too invested in the process now that I had come up with the design myself. I had bought lots of wood and I had paid the woodworking class. And I had put in a lot of hours. I was totally invested and I really felt committed to finishing it. So my question is, when do you feel yourself most committed? So what we've seen in some of our teams is that sometimes they struggle to prioritize between their work commitment for the team and the onboarding of a new member to the team. And it comes down both to workload and to like lack of engagement, practically. And we couldn't expect anything else. One day a new person shows up on your team and you're supposed to feel all responsible and invested. That's not really how we work. So how do we work? Well, there's this mechanism that is often used in creating engaged communities. You can see it in, for instance, Kickstarter or other crowdfunding initiatives, where already before you build and launch your product, you sell your idea into your future customers. And by that, they create an engaged community around your product. So it's something here that we can use also during the onboarding process. It is the act of early contribution. It usually involves, investing your time or effort or even money. And by doing so, you also become emotionally invested. You want to see your product or your team succeed. And it becomes your little baby, just like this shoe rack became mine. And so we have been using this tool in creating this team commitment through early contribution. It's the onboarding backlog. So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of a backlog, then it's usually, or it is a list of work waiting to be done. It's usually listed in a prioritized manner. So let me tell you just a little around how we use it. So before Harold the hire starts, Bob, the buddy, and the entire team sit down and they brainstorm around what they think should be included in Harold's onboarding, what they believe would make Harold a valuable member of the team. And it usually is stuff of a technical manner, because we work with engineers. But it also includes activities such as going out for lunch, or look at the team mission, or learn about all the different communications channels that the team uses. And so they put all that stuff up on the backlog. And once Harold starts, Bob and Harold plan and prioritize the content of this on a weekly basis. So this makes it ultimately different than an onboarding checklist. It becomes a living document because it at all times represents or mirrors the undertakings and the work that is done during Harold's onboarding. And the methodology around this, of course, is taken from agile product development, where we reassess in iterations and adapt to changing conditions. So, what is the acceleration point here? What do you want you to take with you? Well, by involving the team early on in the process and by allowing them impact the onboarding, you can create team commitment. All right. Let's move on to our third tool, which is the purpose workshop.
Yes, we both recently attended a coaching workshop together with Heide Helfen. And one of the most important concepts I learned there was the concept of the whole person. So we are so much more than just our roles. And by getting to know the whole person, it can help you to understand where someone is coming from, or why they act the way they do, or what their values and ideas really are. And when it comes to establishing relationships and building trust in a team, you have to take the whole person into account. Another important aspect when joining a new team is to sort of find your spot on the team, or find your purpose in the team. And for that we have this Find Your Purpose workshop, or Purpose Workshop for short. As with all interactions, this being a workshop between the team and Harold, this is also a chance for exchange of culture, where Harold can learn things about the team, such as what traits do the team value really highly, and what traits do they seem to ignore, or what skills do they have in abundance, and what skills do they seem to lack. To achieve both this finding your purpose as well as this exchange of culture, we use a tool called StrengthsFinder. It's a tool used for both individual development as well as team development. And this being a commercial tool, we're not here to sell the tool, but we will cover the basics, since this is the tool we use at Meltwater. So the essence is that you, as an individual, you get help to discover, explore, and develop the things that you are naturally good at, or your superpowers, Harold being a superhero here. And for the things that you are sort of weaker in, your kryptonite, you are instead encouraged to form partnership with others that are strong in those areas. So take me for an example. I'm not that good with structure. You can ask anyone around me. But Rona here is. So instead of me sort of becoming this master of structure, I rely on Rona to help me with that part. It's part of our partnership. So every team at Meltwater, they participates in this workshop, which is hosted by our coaches, such as Rona. And the essence of the workshop is that every member of the team have a chance to share what they're good at, their superpowers, and also share what they need help with. It allows them to share more of themselves, more of this whole person, but it also encourages the establishment of these partnerships, where some member is needs something which someone else is good at. A common thing to hear during this workshop are things like, "Oh, I can help you with that," or "Oh, you're good at that. That's something we desperately need." So whenever a new talent joins a team, then a new Harold, then we revisit this workshop. It allows both the team and Harold to re-establish these partnerships. And it also speeds up, accelerates Harold's path to productivity by allowing him both to share more of himself, more of what he's good at, but also to help him find what his unique superpower are in this team. Knowing sort of how you contribute to a team both boosts your self-confidence, but it also makes you feel more committed to the team. Knowing that you have something the teams need, then they need you now. And they also have this exchange of culture where they tell about what they're good at and what they need, and share more about their values. So in talking more about needs, let me share another experience. A colleague of mine had been struggling for some time. More often than not, when you spoke to him, you got a "huh" back in response. So in this fantastic, open and vulnerable letter to the entire office, he shares that he's suffering from an hearing impairment. My manager had this awesome response to this letter. So basically, we all sat down with the purpose of finding out how we all could help him with the struggle. And you could feel like the candor and the vulnerability in the letter. This was an environment of sort of safety and support. We really wanted to help him in the struggle. And the outcome was this 4-bullet list of things that we all should do to help him in the struggle. While all of this was really amazing, the most memorable part happened sort of later the same day. Feeling kind of drained by the day, I see one of my colleagues sitting on the floor with a magical whiteboard, if you know what it is, in front of her. And after sort of carefully writing and drawing some cute hamsters, as you see here, she had made a poster with these 4 things we all said. And with this poster flowing through the air, she walks over to our colleague and she goes like, "Look, I made this poster for you to help us all remember what we said today." And she puts it on the wall behind his desk. I mean, you can imagine the reaction on him when she did something like that. So how you contribute to a team doesn't always have to come through doing the work, but can come from unexpected places. This was a very memorable moment to me that showed that you can contribute in many different ways. So, what was the acceleration point here? By allowing Harold to share more of himself and helping him discover what his superpowers are in the team, you can accelerate his path to productivity. Now let's have a look at how the Buddy 2.0 will look like, Rona.
Yes. So what we've seen in other companies is that a lot of the time, culture is attempted to being communicated through management or similar functions by talking about the core values or the company mission. And also, like Apollo said before, that you can't remember a list of values. If you can remember stories. And it ties nicely into what we want to get across here. We believe that if these things aren't translated into actual behaviors and into emotions and interpersonal relationships, they won't mean that much to you. They will just be words on a paper or something diffuse that someone said. And we want to stress that this needs to be more tangible, that culture can only be communicated through exposure. So I want to introduce our last tool then, which is Bob the Buddy 2.0. And now I can imagine many of you thinking, wait a minute, like a buddy. Come on, that's all news. We have a buddy for our newcomers. And so did we in the onboarding experience that Ulla shared with us in the beginning. Remember Ulla sitting in a small room, sweaty hands, and a lump in his belly? So what went wrong in our buddy system? What did we miss? So we didn't realize the importance of the role that Bob the Buddy has. Bob carries the important role of a culture bearer or a culture ambassador, if you so will. He represents the values, the beliefs, and the implicit rules of your company. And he needs to make sure to expose Harold to the values, the beliefs, and the implicit rules. He is the one that will take Harold on a culture ride. So Ulla, you are a buddy for our new product owner, Magnus, right now. Can you tell us what it means in actual behavior to expose Magnus to our company and team culture?
Absolutely. I think exposure is exactly the theme here, sort of. I will make sure to work together with Magnus and have an exchange of values and ideas in the context of work. But then I also will make sure to have a coffee with Magnus and have a lunch with him and having sort of the same exchange of values and ideas, but outside of the context of work. In both instances, I will make sure to include a lot of different people from the organization to sort of increase the exposure. And when working with the onboarding backlog together with Magnus' new manager, we also make sure to plan activities that includes other people from the organization. For instance, Magnus will have a meeting with sales, and they will tell him about what the product does, and then meeting with the coaches to learn about how our processes look and how we work in the company. We also have a party planned next week where Magnus will learn more about sort of the small little rituals and find out more about who we are as a group. For instance, who are the opera singers in the company. And then we also have a board game night, as Rona suggested during the initiation ritual planned, where as part of the initiation for Magnus. So while I'm on the topic of the body, let me revisit the personas we have now. So for Harold, it hasn't changed. It's the same person, but hopefully this time it's sort of the journey will be a little bit better, and with him actually staying. But for Bob, with this knowledge that this exchange of culture is what's important for the body, Bob now focuses a lot more on bringing Harold in on all the small things inside and outside of the office. For instance, who make beer in their spare time, or who can you always bring for a coffee, or why is everyone avoiding sales during closing week? Actually, we're not, because they have candy, but other than that, you do. For Bob, he also uses the onboarding backlog together with the team and plan sort of the activities that they should do during the onboarding. And Bob also makes sure to plan social activities a lot more and make sure to bring the members in, and so they join in on the activity too. And these social activities are, of course, also added to the onboarding backlog. Speaking of the backlog, we have a new persona, and that's Carol the coach. Carol is the team coach for Harold's team, and she has the traits of an agile coach, which means that she loves to get thoughts into action and have this keen sense of making progress. Since Carol works in helping the team with organizing and prioritizing and improving, it is natural that she also helps them with the onboarding backlog, both in the creation, but more importantly, during the actual onboarding and making sure that it is as it should be during the onboarding. Carol is also the main driver and facilitator for this Find Your Purpose workshop, and she works closely together with Martha to design these social activities or any other activities that's needed and could be beneficial to the team. For Martha, she works a lot more now with the social activity together with Bob and Carol, and she also makes sure to encourage Harold to join in on activities outside of the team. For instance, we have guilds and we have other forums for sort of cross-team collaboration, and it's important that Harold gets exposed to those too. In the individual development, then Martha focuses a lot more on sharing more of her whole person as well as allowing Harold to sort of share more of his. And as before, we also have the team, and they are not only here for knowledge transfer, but they participate in the initiation ritual, and they help sort of plan their work together with the onboarding backlog, and they share their strengths and needs in the purpose workshop. So, Rona, what have we learned today?
Yes, so we started out talking about assimilation and what it means. And then we talked about 4 different tools with which you can speed up the process of assimilation and to quicker get to have a productive member of your team. The first tool was initiation ritual, where you mark the entrance of a new member to your team and allow him to become a part of the group. Then we had the onboarding backlog, where you can create team commitment by allowing the team to contribute in the onboarding already before Harold has started, and by allowing them to impact onboarding. Third, we had the purpose workshop, which takes the whole person into consideration and helps Harold find a spot on the team and his unique way of contributing. Last but not least, we had the new and approved Buddy 2.0 that has important role of a culture bearer or a culture ambassador, and that takes Harold with him on a culture ride. We also hope that you brought with you how your different roles in your company might use these different tools in a more successful onboarding process. But if there is one thing that the audience should remember, Ola, what is it?
Well, I have three, actually. It's culture, culture, culture. If you want someone to sort of get up to speed quickly, be committed, and be able to be productive as soon as possible, you have to focus on culture. Culture cannot be transmitted through PowerPoint, but through interactions. And even if it will and can happen naturally, you can speed up the process a lot by design. For Bob, Carol, and Martha, the goal is this exchange of culture over anything else. And while other things are important too, nothing is more important than culture. Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. You have a lot of very good questions. I hope we have more time for them. Can an onboarding backlog become an extra pressure on the new hire, having expectations in someone who is unknown to the company and the team? What's your experience?
Man, hard to read from here.
I would say no, because Harold is participating in prioritizing and planning the different activities, and it should, fit into the usual work of the team.
Yeah, and I think also it's really important that it's not you have to do this by Friday. It's not, the time pressure is not there. We have when we're working together with Magnus, new manager, we have chunks. This is short term. You have to focus on the short term, and this is longer term. But it's when Harold has joined, they have this conversation. Should we do it now, or what's more important for you? So it helps Harold actually, rather than puts pressure on him, I think.
So that's partly the answer to what's the time frame for all these events to happen for a new employee. That was anonymous. That used to be the second one a second ago.
Yeah, all these events. Yeah, it kind of depends on what you put into the backlog, of course, and on the team and the person, and it depends.
Yeah, and I think an important part is also that you can contribute early with things as well. I mean, it's not a binary thing that you start with no knowledge and then you come to full speed ahead. So you can, and that also the backlog helps, because you can find, okay, this is something we need to focus on early, and you can help early, and this is something that comes later, and you are not a full member, full in your role yet, but it can come later. So it's not a binary thing.
Let's see the blue one. What would happen with Bob the Buddy's current sprint work? Will he be 100% dedicated to onboard Harold? Does it have any impact on the team velocity?
I mean, when you become a buddy, then yes, a lot of your time has to go to being a buddy. So you can't be 100% in the team and be a buddy, which is actually part of the failure in the first experience as well, that you had a struggle in the workload. So it's important to give Bob time to have time to be a buddy as well. But then which we also find with the backlog is now the team can give that room as well. They can see, oh, we need to do this and this and this in short term, so let's plan accordingly and reduce a little bit of the content in order to also onboard. So it's easier to give room to the entire team. So of course, yes, whenever a new person joins the team, the velocity goes down, but in this way you can at least it's a collaborative thing and not thing for just the buddy or just the manager or something. Everyone is joining in.
What's the time frame for all these events to happen for a new employee? We talked about that. How do you ensure that Bob the Buddy 2.0 is a right representative of your company? How do you select them? Do you train them?
Yes, it's a fantastic question, which everyone says when they really don't know answer, right? But I think we have just started to explore the idea of coaching the body more and having the coaches coach the body. And as with culture, the best representative is someone which is part of the company. And I mean, culture is something that resides in everyone in the company. So it's hard to find, this is the mechanism to find the body. I think you have to gut feeling gets you really far in this area. And then also, which is too big of a topic to discover, but in the recruiting process, it's important that you get this sort of the chemistry going already. You know, does these two persons work together and stuff? So you get sort of information before the new person joins. So I think it's a gut feeling thing, I guess my answer is.
Thank you for Magnus's contribution. I will win the board game.
Thank you, Magnus.
We spoke about millennials earlier today. Do we need to work with them differently? Do they need extra attention?
I felt like during this talk, I had the pleasure of working in a company which I didn't sort of feel myself targeted by the speech too much. I felt like the conversation between sort of being seen, not only when you sort of leave the company, but all the time, is something that happens all the time. So I don't have the material here because I'm working in a place where that's sort of not applicable. So I can't sort of see that there is a difference. But
What he said.
Well, then, thank you very much, both of you. And this is you.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Awesome.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have hands.
I have new clothes.
You have what?
I have new clothes. I have more clothes.
You have more clothes, yeah?
You have more clothes on than you do, actually. That's very unusual for women. Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you got
Thank you.
dressed
Wow.
by the sketch, yeah?
Great.
Looks like a first time.
Yes.
Thank you very much.